She wakes up from bombs, shelling, and deafening sounds, and she jumps in pajamas into her car and tries to escape and flee.
Today I'm going to be speaking with an old friend from the Ukraine, but before I get to that interview, I just wanted to say a couple of things about the NCAA swimming championship because it's dear to my heart as a swimmer. So many of you saw what happened with LiaThomas winning, a second ahead of everybody else. I feel for the 4th place. I feel for the 9th place. I feel for the 17th place because the cutoff is final A and final B to get the All-American status. So anyways, go back and check the video on LiaThomas. I get into some of the details on that particular video, even though it's old news, it's not really old news because this saga will continue. And as far as today's video goes, at the end of the interview, I will have also some very latest news from the front, from people that I've been directly involved with, some very, very exciting things happening, and we see the hand of God actually intervening, which is awesome. And thank you for all of you who have helped out. And now here's the interview.
Peppo, I met you in Rome when I came to Italy for the first time 13 years ago. Wow. I was a total stranger. I didn't speak a word in Italian. And we met at the porch of the church.
Okay.
And it was going to rain heavily. And you were the one who asked me, what are you doing here? Where are you from? And what are you going to see? What are your plans? And I actually was visiting briefly Rome, but I really wanted to see Porta Portese. It was Sunday, right after the church. There was this famous flea market, which I never skipped because it's where you really learn the culture. Yes. And where you can get a real bargain for authentic things. Yeah. And I remember Peppo said, listen, you know what? I can give you a lift to Porta Portese because I need to buy a whole bunch of special, super trendy electronic watches because my wife, Jane, is running this camp where kids need these watches. And it was the time when there were no smartphones. My phone was running out of battery and the sky was overcast with clouds. It was gonna pour. And what did Peppo do? Not only did he bring me to Porta Portese, he got me the watch, he gave me his umbrella, and he says, I realize you're running out of juice on your phone, but here's the watch at 5 p.m. Ponte San Angelo. I'm going to meet you there, and I want you to meet my family, all my friends, and we're going to have a nice fellowship after the church, but be sure to be here at 5 p.m. And he gave me a nice map. He explained me how to talk to vendors at Porta Portese.
I need to meet that guy.
And at 5 p.m. after that heavy rain, your umbrella really saved me from getting soaking wet. My shoes were wet. I was barefoot. They disintegrated in the heavy rain. But those clouds above Rome were so romantic. And they were not scary at all because I had a shield from this warm-hearted person who was a true brother, extending hospitality, who was an epitome of amazing, hospitable, warm-hearted people of Italy. And then you're home. I met Isa. She was a kid back then who showed me her craft made of dough. Wow. And we stayed in touch. I remember we were writing letters because there was no electronic communication back then, and exchanging stickers. She was sending me stickers of princesses and mermaids. So I have a sticker for Isa. Oh my God, she's such a beautiful woman. And she says, these are Biscarini muscles.
I love it.
And Biscarini, beauty and strength. You invited us with your amazing hospitality and your amazing cuisine and sharing the beauty and warmth of your home hearth. Thank you so very much. I can't be grateful enough. And here we are again, you know, you guys extended hand of support at this dismal hour.
I wanted to talk to you, Iryna, about this dismal hour, as you said, because somehow the Lord kind of put it on my heart a couple of weeks ago to be more involved with what's happening. And it's been beautiful because he connected me with different people. Some people in Italy, I was on the phone yesterday with them. Beautiful story, because this one guy, he is the president of this organization called Salvati per servire, saved to serve is the name.
Amazing.
And they've been sending one semi-truck a week to the Ukraine, and every day they're sending 7 to 8 smaller vans into the Ukraine, because by having smaller vans, they can go more peripherally to different churches. With the big semi, they need to go to specific places. And now apparently it seems like the Russians are kind of trying to take over some of that, because I heard that some of the troops are not well taken care of as well. So they're kind of stealing some of the stuff that is coming in. And maybe you can correct me on that. But they're doing phenomenal work. And then through this video cast, I met an intel of the Navy. Because he was a fella that was introduced by somebody else, that was introduced by a doctor that knew Jane. I mean, just kind of a weird thing, but God works in mysterious ways. So anyways, long or short, he has different tents. You know, we were talking yesterday, you know, Peppo, we have about 100 tents that we want to use, and each of them can host 80 people. So that's 8,000 people that can actually bring into the Romanian border or the Polish border and set them up with also a medical tent. So there are a lot of good things happening, and it's exciting. Yeah, it really is. And to me, those are all answers to prayer, because I know that a lot of people in Ukraine are praying, and a lot of people around the world are praying for Ukraine. So tell me a little bit from your eyes as a citizen, as someone that has parents right there, right now in the midst of all of this, something that is beyond news, because news sometimes are tinted. And tell me straight, you know, what's going on. I mean, oh, and I should say, you're well qualified to speak about this as well, because you also have degrees in languages. I think you have degrees also in history, or a love of history. Cultural
diplomacy, and of course, any language is intertwined with history, because this is how people communicate. And now you are in
Los Angeles. You're coordinating efforts in Los Angeles, correct?
Yes.
How long will you be there in Los Angeles?
So I am a cultural diplomacy program director at the Ukrainian Arts Center in Los Angeles, which is a beating heart of Ukrainian community here in LA.
Okay.
It's a huge community, but since LA is also immense, we are all scattered around, and that's a challenge. But unfortunately, the circumstances of war brought all the Ukrainians together like never before.
Yeah.
And there's always been a little confusion between Ukrainians and Russians. You know, it was more perceived as a grand Slavic community with a major accent on Russian population. Would you make a correction?
Because I just finished an interview with my pastor, which will air the following week, but he was under the impression that Ukrainians are Russian, and I said, no, I think their roots go back somewhere else, right?
And you're so right, and I'm so glad you could make that statement and clarify, because right now what we are observing and contemplating with horror, Russia encroaching upon Ukraine with this insidious full-scale war, is not a surprise for Ukrainians, and Russians, through the whole history of being the neighbor of Ukraine, a borderline country of Ukraine, have always been not a friendly neighbor, rather the enemy. So, and we've got to draw a very distinct borderline and speak in terms of black and white, that Ukraine is not part of Russia and will never be. Ukraine has its own territory, history, culture, mentality, folklore, and we are our own democratic state. We are free, independent, sovereign nation that chose.
I love how you're passionate about it. I mean, you're smiling when you're saying this is who we are. You know, you're proud of your heritage.
So I will explain you in detail so that you guys could understand. So Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union as a Ukrainian Socialistic Republic for 69 years. We broke free from the Soviet communistic yoke in 1991, August 24th, when this beautiful yellow-blue flag was raised. I remember this day when my father brought 2 pieces of cloth, one yellow, one blue. He bought it somewhere and asked my mom, sew it together. And instead of those rugs that, you know, in Eastern European cold homes, they put on the walls, let's just hang it here. It's a symbol of our national identity. Finally, we are free people. So during the Soviet Union, well, when the Soviet Union was formed, and we have to go backwards in history, and before this full-scale invasion, Putin declared his muddle-headed, incoherent speech, trying to spoon-feed his Russian population that Ukraine does not exist as a state. It was formed by Lenin in 1922, and it belongs actually to Russia. We are going to come and save them and liberate Russian-speaking population because Ukrainians are nationalistic, fascists, Nazis, and whatever language he wanted to call us, and to deny who we are. So communists usurped Ukrainian lands, and they expropriated the lands of Ukraine and announced them as the part of socialistic republic. They took farms of people and collectivized them. Another thing they did, they forbade us to speak our mother tongue. We survived linguocide. Ukrainian language was banned. There was no education in Ukrainian. Ukrainian literature was burned. We also survived cultural suppression. What Russian people would do to us, they would announce competition for musicians, and all those brilliant people believing and thinking that they're gonna show their talent and demonstrate the beauty of Ukrainian art were trapped, exiled, and murdered. So my own great-grandfather was exiled to Siberia. Yes, and he was a famous, outstanding musician, brilliant man who spoke 5 languages, including Italian. So another thing which was even more horrible, they went to extreme lengths and carried out physical extermination of our nation during the years of 1932, 1933. Think about it. During 2 years, they starved Ukrainian people to death.
Wow.
And approximately 10 million people, innocent, beautiful, hardworking Ukrainians were dead, buried alive.
How much of the total populace was that? Like 20%? I have no idea in comparison. You know?
It was huge. I have to look it up.
Okay.
But like modern population of Ukraine right now is 44 million people.
Oh, wow. So probably back then might have been 27, 28 million.
It was immense. So, and the rest of the world, civilized world, acknowledged that act as a genocide because those people were isolated. There were troops surrounding fertile lands of Ukraine. Everybody knows that Ukraine has always been a breadbasket for Europe. We have the most fertile lands and the most hardworking people. It's unthinkable.
Yeah.
So they were isolated, they were terrorized and starved to death. My great-grandma's brothers died of hunger. So it touched every family. It touched every generation. So, and these atrocities kept going on. And even when I was growing up in the Soviet Ukraine, my parents were wise enough and conscious enough, regardless the fact that the Soviet Union, Russia, attempted merging of nations policy. They technically united 15 republics, which were separate countries with separate historical paths, and separate cultures, different languages. What they wanted to do to create big, massive land, which territorially was 1/6 part of the earth.
Wow.
But they installed a dictatorship regime in Moscow, Kremlin, with supreme language Russian, merging nations together, starving to death Ukrainians and exiling Ukrainian population to the north and bringing Russian population to Ukraine. It was massive displacement of population and forceful demographic enmeshment.
Now,
and of course,
you mentioned the 15, 16 countries that wanted to be engulfed into the Soviet Union. So did the same extermination take place in other places, like, I don't know, maybe Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania?
I know that every country which you mentioned did suffer from the suppression of the Soviet Union, but there has always been extreme measures towards Ukraine, because Ukrainians have always been free thinking and the most opposing, and we are proud to have this glorious yet gory history for liberation. When Soviets usurped Ukraine, we had our moment of independence. We proclaimed it. We are very strong nation with flamboyant culture. We are very outspoken. We have roots of democratic values, and our history dates back to prehistoric times. The very first architectural construction on the European continent known to humanity is actually found on the territory of modern Ukraine in Cherkasy region, Mezhyrich. This amazing construction of dome in the shape of 149 mammoth bones. Every textbook of architecture starts with actually Ukraine. So moreover, if Russians are trying to spread myths that we are an older brother, we are a greater state, we are a grander empire, they've always had these imperialistic ambitions, which is simply not true. Kyiv is the capital of Ukraine, and it was established in 482. And the capital of Russia is Moscow, which was founded so much later in 1147.
Wow.
So we have hundreds of years over, separating us. We Ukrainians are different linguistically, culturally, mentally, and that's what I want to communicate.
So what I'm getting out of what you're saying, which is quite interesting actually to hear some of the background, So you went through that period, 32, 33 of starvation, displacement, and so on and so forth. And then finally, 31 years ago, you're coming to freedom. You taste freedom.
Yes.
And I understand the resiliency now of saying, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to that.
Yes, it's true.
That's why the president is so bold in saying, the heck with this. Biden is buying him a ticket to come. Forget the ticket. I'm staying here with my people.
That's true.
Because I'm going to be an example. And to be an example that is also contagious. And I think that when you're looking at courage, courage can be extremely contagious, right? So he's making a bold statement, the underdog that doesn't have a chance to win, all of a sudden it looks like, well, if they're hanging on a little bit longer, I'm hearing that if you guys hang on another couple of weeks, you might come out at the other end. Correct me on that. What are the news that you're hearing?
Absolutely right, Peppo. Absolutely right. Mm-hmm. So my own parents made a decision to stay home, even though there was a chance to flee, to leave the country, to become a refugee. But why do you want to become a refugee if you have your own sacred God-given land you were born at, where your grandparents are buried, where your children were born, where they made their first steps, where they
That's right.
Were nurtured and learned how to speak their mother tongue. So I want to give thanks to my mom and dad, who, regardless the fact of Ukrainian language being prohibited from common use, they educated me in Ukrainian, both at home and publicly. We were probably the only family in the military town where I grew where they were bold enough and courageous enough, as you mentioned, to let the rest of the world see that we shall not be ashamed to be Ukrainians, and we cannot be silenced. And I remember when teachers of the primary school heard my mom and dad talking to me in Ukrainian, and they were addressing them with despise, saying, "You're making your child a linguistic cripple. Why are you talking to her in Ukrainian?" While my parents were saying, vice versa, my child will be a linguistic genius and polyglot instead.
And you became one.
Gosh, I wish I could live up to those expectations.
What do you do? How many languages do you speak?
I speak 5 languages.
Oh, heck.
So, but there, as a linguist, I know that really mastering a language, the degree of a professional, you should dedicate so much more time. And anyways, so
I understand
right now,
the resolve.
Yes.
The people that people have.
So, and
because there is a big difference between your parents said, okay, I'm going to be a refugee somewhere, versus somebody that is going to be an immigrant somewhere. Because immigrant is by your own volition, your own choice. I want to go to see a better country, to see more opportunity, and so on and so forth. When you're a refugee, distress pushes you somewhere else. It's not your choice, right?
Yes.
So how, thinking of that, how many people, I don't know how many have left the country. Do you have any numbers? Do you have any idea of how many have been displaced somewhere else?
Huge amounts, mostly women and children. And Poland is the country that opens the border without even checking the documents. Technically, Poland and Ukraine right now are brotherly states, and Poland embraced the biggest amount of Ukrainian. So there are a lot of Ukrainians who go to Hungary, Romania, Moldova. So, and anywhere else. And I receive a lot of messages from my friends and colleagues asking me to put them through with some of my friends in Europe who can host them temporarily while they're still figuring out what to do next. This is excruciating and heartbreaking when you have to flee your home and you don't know whether you're ever going to be able to come back. So my sister, my younger sister Miroslava, she recently bought her house, which she renovated, and it was her new home. They celebrated housewarming party on New Year's Eve. And imagine on the February 24th, early in the morning at 5 a.m., she wakes up from bombs, shelling, and deafening sounds, and she jumps in pajamas into her car and tries to escape and flee somewhere in the direction of the west, where our grandparents actually live. And it seems like the first thing you do, you try and stay with your relatives who are also in danger, and they're old, you know, they need to be taken care of. And they believe that Russian troops were not there yet, because the Western Ukraine has always been like the fort of Ukraine, and closer, you know, very strong national identity core. So, and while she was moving in her car slowly, normally this trip would take a couple of hours. It took her 2 days.
Wow.
And yeah, there were already Russian tanks rolling. It was very scary. It was, you know, we lost sleep. We had nightmares. So right now she's there staying with my grandparents, relatively safe. You never know where Russian bomb is going to shell or land. It's very random and indiscriminate.
Yeah.
So
tell me, why do you think that, I mean, we have seen some of these maternity hospitals, you know, being blown up, and a lot of civilians becoming targets. Why is he trying to install terror, or is it strategically an impediment because he cannot roll in with the tanks, and therefore by shooting at the distance, you don't know where the missiles are going to go?
So there are several answers to your question, Peppo. So first of all, Putin holds Stalin as his idol. And also he thinks that Stalin didn't do enough to hold the Soviet Union together, and his successors didn't do enough. And Putin has this frantic idea to reinstall the Soviet Union and exceed Stalin's achievements. And you imagine that Stalin was
killed what, 25 million of his own? I mean, that's...
Yeah, he was worse than Hitler, for God's sake. So, and for Putin, when there was the time in the Soviet history when they dismantled the idolatry for Stalinism, and they denounced those horrible acts he committed against his own people, there is evidence that Putin found Stalin's portrait and hanged it as an icon on the wall. And in his essays, Putin clearly states that the worst and the most tragic event of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he wants to gather all those lands together. This is number one. But another thing, that he's a thug. He comes from criminal background. He also has KGB education. And you know that for those guys, the life of a person doesn't matter. Life of the nation doesn't matter. All that matters is power, greed of power, and might. And unfortunately, Russian people historically were always in favor of a strong leader. We don't see a lot of protests in Russia, while Ukrainians resist and oppose puppet-installed Russian government. Like, for instance, in 2014, we had a revolution of dignity, and I was there for 3 months. Ukrainian people were peacefully protesting against Russian-installed regime, whose path was joining and going backwards, getting united with Russia. Ukrainian students were the first to go to the Independence Square wearing yellow-blue ribbons and singing songs of Ukrainian beautiful spirit, proclaiming that we are an independent state, we are a democratic country, no way back to the Soviet Union. So, and that protest, which started with up to 100 students, was severely dispersed by riot police. They were beating young ladies and gentlemen brutally, and dragging girls by hair, you know, up to bruises. And the next thing you see, the whole country rises up. My father comes to Kyiv by the very first train and makes a huge banner on the, he paints on the huge sheet saying, "Parents for children, independent Ukraine." And we were standing for 3 months peacefully. They tried to disperse us, humiliating us verbally, warning us that we're gonna kill you, we're gonna put you all in prison. We kept standing, and we were getting bigger and bigger. We were standing there in the coldest month through January, February. They tried cold water. It's already an act against humanity to do so. We kept standing, then rubber bullets. And then they shoot us with snipers, and over 100 Ukrainians were shot dead, precisely. And my dad was there on the day. And yet Ukrainians did not fail to resist. All we had, we were shielded with love for our land and love for freedom. And for that sacrifice, we continued to fight, because it could not be in vain. So, and as an aftermath of the Revolution of Dignity, that bloody massacre, Russian installed President Yanukovych was scared for his life, and he leaves the country and goes to Russia, where he is still right now. And Russian troops annexed Crimea while our country was decapitated and did not have the government at that moment. And they also invade the eastern Ukraine, and they occupy the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. And this war, which the world started acknowledging since February 24th, started 8 years ago. It didn't have enough
That's what I'm saying, 24
information. Yeah. Actually, this has been going on for already 8 years. It's a hybrid war. This is a historical term, and it's carried out on multiple levels. It's information war, it's cultural war, it was economic blackmail. We all know about the countries who were trading with Russia, and there were agreements made, and unfortunately a lot of political elite in European countries was purchased by Russian money. So this is
not
true.
only European countries, not only European countries.
Yeah,
you know, there is a lot with the current administration as well. You know, yeah.
So
we have it on
sadly,
tape to boot, but you know, they quiet it down, right?
But right now, what you guys see, Ukrainians are the bravest people, and the destiny of peace on the European continent, and maybe even of the entire earth, is being defended on the territory of my beautiful Ukraine.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier that to me it's maybe worth looking into briefly, but when you're saying the Russian propaganda, I mean, we know what that is. You know, typically propaganda is not an exposure of truth, but is a specific agenda that you are undertaking to change the mind, to change the view of people, right? So I would suspect that the propaganda that the Russians are putting out is full of lies, correct?
It's 100% lies. There's not even a single drop of truth there. And I'm trying to talk to my Russian friends. I also have family in Russia. They are shot. Their brain are covered with a layer of impervious BS. And it's hard to explain. They don't understand what
it's almost like as if they went blind, right?
And
blind and deaf.
some of that here in the US, where you're saying, oh, wait a minute, but we know as believers that the word tells us that the enemy blinds the eyes of the fools, right?
Exactly.
So for you and I, something can be so clear and you're saying, oh, can't you see this? Well, no, they can't, because they've been blinded. So you can explain as much as you want, as hard as you want, but it's not going to get through to them.
Yeah, unfortunately. But there's also something in the mentality of people who don't attempt to resist this regime. While Ukrainians are lining up to pick up gun and defend their land, and while Ukrainian women are being shelled in maternity hospitals, Russian women go and buy lingerie in Victoria's Secret because the brand is leaving the country. And Russian men are lining up at ATM machines to get a couple of rubles instead of defending their rights, and instead of standing on the side of truth and overthrowing this horrid dictatorship that is dragging them all to hell. I really don't understand this choice.
So essentially, Putin, by upholding Stalin, as you said before, is he a Marxist, or is he upholding the Orthodox Church at the same time? Where is he at?
So essentially, what you see through the history of Russia is an overlapping layers of autocracy, which right now is an example of autocratic regime blessed by the toughness of Russian patriarchal Orthodox Church with their Archbishop Kirill, who actually blesses using monasteries as the storage facilities for weaponry. And moreover, moreover, he would bless Putin for this war, calling it a holy military operation.
Wow.
And moreover, there is even evidence and recordings how Patriarch Kirill is blessing military equipment, like murderous, deadly military equipment called Satan, with the holy water. So
Wow.
this is insane.
Wow.
How religion, pseudo manifestation of godliness, can be used as a tool against humanity and against peaceful people, which you
Probably that's
see
part
right
of the
now.
propaganda, because by having
Yes.
somebody like that endorsing what's going on and actually blessing it, you're actually inciting the people that are follower of the Orthodox Church to say, no, this is holy war, right?
I can tell you guys that Russian Orthodox Church are the wolves-wearing sheepskin. It's insane. It's it's unthinkable and atrocious. And I really pray God can intervene and condemn this disaster. Yeah, it should be exposed.
Yeah. Wow.
There's no justification.
Yeah.
And and people should educate themselves. And
now
it's hard.
A couple of questions, because it's probably kind of hard for us to really understand the equilibrium, the balance of powers. I'm hearing some things that I cannot share, from some intel that is somewhat alarming, and I'm wondering, okay, is that going to escalate things? Because you said earlier that Putin is unstable. I mean, somebody that wants to bring back Stalin, in my mind, is out of his brain. But in that instability, does it mean that perhaps he could be trigger happy even with nuclear if he comes to it?
So what you see is the battle between the biggest nuclear powers in the world. And we know that he is an egomaniac, and if he was given a choice whether he'd be overthrown or he'd be the ruler of the world demolished by nuclear power, of course he would follow the letter. Yeah. So, and we cannot, gosh, it's so hard to express it. We cannot underestimate a chance. And we have to really be...
What do you think, in your opinion, that the West should be doing? Because we have been at the beginning watching, we were waiting, we put some sanctions, and now we're sending some weapons. I mean, to what extent should the West be involved?
I wish the West reacted sooner and Putin had paid for all the war crimes he had already committed. Whatever he did, invading Chechnya, and then Georgia, and then Ukraine, and nobody held him accountable for those war crimes, and everything went off like water of duck's tail. So, and when you're dealing with a bully and a thug, he's got to be counteracted accordingly, and he was testing his borders. And this is how far he went ballistic on Ukraine. And unfortunately, Ukraine we willingly gave up our nuclear weapon in 1994 as we proclaimed our independence. There were a lot of democratic choices made. And the United States, the United Kingdom, and ironically Russia signed a Budapest Memorandum, which meant that in exchange of giving up the third largest nuclear weapon, Ukraine was supposed to be given protection of its territorial integrity if anybody invades. So
the US signed off on that, didn't they?
Yes, US, UK, and Russia. So, and Ukraine was invaded, but no, in 2008, but no one intruded. There were some little sanctions which meant nothing to those oligarchs who own the rest, the whole world. Their money is already in Europe, in offshore zones, sheltered, right? So, and even if they had to stay in Russia, that's a huge land, they're sitting on oil, minerals, and diamonds, and they can just be little tsars in their own land. So it's, I wish the world had been more resolute and make him pay for the crimes. But right now, we are grateful for every single weapon and ammunition and helmet and bulletproof vest and moral support, humanitarian aid. We need this to go nonstop right now, and we do realize that this is a very, as you, Peppo, mentioned, frail equilibrium. We don't want to provoke this maniac, and we've got to build the golden bridge for him to retreat and somehow fool him, because that would be insane if he pushes the button, then we're all gone.
But at the same time, as you said, I don't think he's going to come to terms. I mean, he started something that probably he wants to finish. And he wants to finish according to his idea of what he's going to look like, right?
Yes.
So I don't know how much compromise there can be.
It's a very tough question, but what I know, yes, we do need to close the sky. It's unthinkable that in the 21st century, this beautiful city of Mariupol that is supposed to be a place for
You're
people to go.
talking about no-flying zone, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, it's on the south of Ukraine, Mariupol, the city on the shore of the Azov Sea, which has been incinerated, where they shelled maternity hospital, and when they bombed the shelter where children were in the huddled in the basement of the theater with huge signs, which you could see from heaven above, from satellite height. You can see it says children. So they bombed it, and they're starving to death, those people. 350,000 people without water, power, without food, under the debris of the broken houses. And this is another starvation, and this is genocide. This is act against humanity. It's a war crime. There is enough evidence to for the Hague, and he's got to be treated justly. We just have to figure out the way. I also hope there are other scenarios that those oligarchs who start feeling that they're getting strangled slowly and squeezed and losing their assets, there might be some palace coup. We know that Russian history had a lot of coup.
Putin put a lot of those people in power. You know, yes. He provided the finances for them.
Exactly.
So probably they have a strong alliance and allegiance to him, right? And to create a coup, I don't see. I don't know how, unless they smell that everything is going to capitulate, and then they become part of the winning party. I don't see how that can actually take place. But as we say, you know, tough equilibrium, but we know that God is in control even in the midst of this.
Yes, I know. And it does seem like the battle between David and Goliath. And we do know who is going to win. We're standing on the side of light, truth. God is with us. You know, we are so full of strength, power, courage. Our morale is high.
You guys feel, I mean, are you hearing people saying, hey, we feel the prayers of the saints?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are grateful for every prayer and word of concern and every word and deed. And our soldiers don't go to battle without praying to God for defense and protection. And, you know, our own anthem of Ukraine has beautiful words, which I want the rest of the world to know. And, you know, listen to it with your heart open and meditate on that. And, pronounce it as a prayer. So, glorious spirit of Ukraine for ages stays ignited. Blessed by longing for our liberty, we shall stand united. Like the dew in rays of sunshine, our foes will perish. Together, brethren, plead and prosper in the land you cherish. We'll lay down our souls and bodies for desired freedom, and will prove that we are a nation of the Cossack people. So we are the nation of extreme resilience. We've got experience through century how to fight and defend and break through the shackles of oppression, and we shall overcome it. I'm so strong. There are moments of dismay when I'm startled and I cannot even breathe. It's hard to find the word for prayer, and I know that the Spirit himself is elevating my thoughts and my grief to the heavenly hosts, and God can hear me speechless and act upon it. But there are these moments of extreme joy and faith when I proclaim the victory and I say amen, and you God are victorious and you are with us, and we shall overcome. We are approaching Easter. You know, and we know who defeated enemy, and to defeat enemy, you've got to first defeat the darkness. You know, you've got to pierce the snake, and this is what Ukraine is going through. It's not just a battle between flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle.
You know, one good thing also, there is a saying that you cannot defeat a man that won't quit.
Yes, indeed. And that's who we are. Non malare mai.
Yeah, it is true.
Yes, yes, Peppo.
Iryna,
What do you think? What do you think, Peppo? How are we going to get over this? And
well, I think first of all that all of this is not new to God, and sometimes in times of uncertainty, in times of confusion, in time of trouble, in times of adversity, we can see that even in the Old Testament, that the only hope really is in the Maker. So as I was saying earlier, this is not a surprise to him. It's like, oops, I didn't know Putin was going to do this. So if he's allowing all of this to happen, is because he has a purpose that is specific. I don't know what that is. I don't know if we are in the end times. It seems like we are pointing toward the birth pains, definitely. So everything is accelerating, everything is disintegrating. Morals are out of the window. I've been here 2 years and I see such a degradation of even moral standards. This week we have a transgender swimmer that is swimming as a woman, and he's a man. I mean, we're doing so many things that are contrary to what God calls us to be. So part of it is maybe a consequence of our sin. Part of it is just his plan and his unfolding. So it gives me comfort that even though I don't know what tomorrow holds, I know who holds tomorrow, and I can find peace in that. So I think that all of us as brothers and sisters in the Lord should come to the aid, for minimum, pray for you guys. And then if we can contribute, if we can do something on a practical level, absolutely, get involved with that as well.
Yeah. So. And what I know that right now Ukrainians are being tested as a nation, how strong we are. And I strongly believe it's our final victorious battle over the enemy. Yeah. And we are going through the desert of death, but we are gonna get to the green pastures, and and we will have our table covered in front of the enemy, and the cup of grace will overflow. Yes, thank you everyone who's praying, who's supporting Ukraine, who wants to know the truth. It takes courage to be able to open your mind and learn the truth. Awesome. So I encourage everybody, please try to think critically, try to separate the chaff from the grain, because the times are grievous right now. And
I wanted to thank you, Iryna, for your time. Awesome what you're doing. We are with you in prayer, and we continue to pray until this thing is solved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hang in there.
Thank you, Peppo. Thank you. Yes.
Ciao, ciao, Bella. Bye-bye.
Grazie. Ciao, ciao.
Hey, guys. Here's our weekly report from Romania. Okay, here we go. The refugees still now from Ukraine, there are about 500,000 that came into Romania. Yesterday, we had 13,000 crossing the border. I have to tell you that in the past few days, there are fewer than in the past week, because as you may have heard from the news, the Russians are more or less on standby, and the refugees is very interesting. They are also on standby. So what's happening now, they are not crossing into Romania. They are staying by the Ukrainian border close to the Romania in case the Russians are intensifying their attacks to be ready to cross in. This is because a lot of them do not know English. A bunch of them have kids who can go to school, and also they have Ukrainian money, they can buy the food. So the crisis is right now on the Ukrainian border, right on top of Romania. Regarding camps, they are full of food. We don't need them anymore in Romania. That's why we want to focus on Ukraine, starting with the transportations next week. We have a full kitchen with some cooks that are doing a great job by the border. And also, as you see, we divided our our wall table in two. One is in Siget, one side of the border we work, and one is by Chernovuts, that's another side of the border we work. So, on Siget,
we found a church, Betania, in the Romanian side that is basically a camp refugee, where whatever refugees are coming from Ukraine and need lodging, need transportation, need medical care, need, I don't know, whatever needs, they will contact us and we're going to go and pick them up and take them to Arad. Already we've done that so far. At the same time, we have a contact in the border, Marian, who is working as an officer representing the Romanian government, who's helping us with papers. Last time when we crossed into Ukraine, last week, it took 6 hours to do all the papers for our truck that went there. We're going to focus from all of the needs in Ukraine, we want to focus on the city of Kyiv. As you know, it's under bombardment and not a lot of people are helping the churches there. We got in touch with a church, specific evangelical church in the city, and we already sent a team crossing the border in Ukraine. They came with their cars, we came with our cars, we unloaded, they loaded their cars and they went on. We have 3 different points of changing and unchanging the goods, meaning we unload at the border, then there is another transportation to a city about 3-4 hours further, and from there another transportation goes to Kyiv, because Kyiv is pretty far from us. But nevertheless, we want to focus on Kyiv. Right now, we need to figure out how to change dollars and euros in Ukrainian money, because the banks in Ukraine have a hard time, so we try to figure out that stuff. And at the same time, we are trying to get names and numbers, phone numbers, and how many in a family from those in Kyiv or other parts of Ukraine who want to come to Romania specifically to get help. We already got yesterday, for example, a woman with a 7-year-old child, and we got her to work starting next week in a pastry shop. But we have people working now with the Romanian government with work legislation to see how can we do it that she can work legally and get a salary. At the same time, we are working with schools here to see how can we get children from Ukraine that don't speak English or Romanian get into our schools, you know. So all of these things we are doing right now in this point of the border called Sighet on the northern part of Romania. On the next point of the border, this is the biggest one in Siret, yeah. This is Siret, is the border in Romania. Cernăuți is the biggest town in the southern Ukraine where most of the refugees are right now there. Right now in the city of Cernăuți, we work with the mayor and we are putting up tents. I'm talking about tents that can have 2,000 people in one, okay? These are huge tents. We are sending construction team next week to put them up. We are buying chairs and tables, and also we're sending volunteers that can feed them. We have kitchens and we're going to send cooks and funds. Also, we work with the hospital. Remember I told you about the children's hospital? We already sent the transportation. They arrived this past week there. But now we're gathering medicine and medical equipment. On Tuesday, the first transportation is going to go, and probably on Friday next week or Thursday, the second one is going to go. We are sending them also pillows and things for the beds and other things that are necessary for the many children that are overwhelming this hospital right now. We also bought special equipment that they requested from Switzerland. It cost us about 6,000 euros. And we just bought it and we're going to transport it to their place. Also, the mayor in Cernăuți is providing for us housing in a school and also food. And at the same time, we got a lady officer from our church who's working at the border. She's our contact at the border. On the other side of the border, this is in Ukraine, on the other side of the border in Siret, on the Romanian side, we are getting in touch right now. I'm going to call a Christian NGO that is helping the refugees that crossed over the border who need contacts, lodging, and so on. And we want to see if they need volunteers and how much funding do they need to feed these people and maybe bring them to Arad. Yeah. So next week, Harvest Arad is going to send through other vertical churches in our country here. We're going to send a guy that's going to work strategically to kind of evaluate the situation in this part of of the borders. We're going to send some volunteers, especially construction people. We're going to send the medical stuff in 2 teams, Tuesday probably till Thursday, and Thursday probably till Sunday. And we are going to gather some medical needs. Right here are some pharmacists and doctors that provided already some stuff, but also the hospital sent us a huge list. We have about $1,500 of medical needs come from different pharmacies in Arad, 4,000 from Timișoara, and we need about $8,000 medical needs that we are still searching for. So next week we try to gather and cover all of these needs, put them in these transportations and send them there. So right now this is where we are. We're so thankful for all of you guys that are helping us here from different churches in the US and other parts of the world probably, who are praying and helping us. So we try to keep informed every week about what we're doing and how we manage the stuff. Pray for us, and may God be praised for everything He's doing in this time of crisis. Thank you.
Lo scarichiamo qui ad Orhoi perché dobbiamo andare col bus a tutte le chiese dell'Ucraina, e se non andiamo col bus questo camion sarà scaricato nel deposito centrale della città, e così è meglio di andare col bus perché questa roba arriva direttamente ai nostri fratelli. Grazie.
This is one of the miracles that are happening. Awesome. This one representative of Salvati per servire, some of you have given to that organization that I'm working with in Italy in conjunction with Cristian Barbosu that you saw before in the other clip, and the Navy officer that contacted me that wants to set up tent. So I'm now working with all these 3, and this bus, 60-seater, was picked up for $11,500 by Salvati per servire. That is a miracle. And they will use it to bring in refugees into Romania. Awesome. Praise God.